This is Sarnia Lambton Daily for Wednesday, May 20th. Good evening, I'm Terry Doyle. There has been an increase in the number of COVID-19 positive cases at one of the local nursing homes dealing with an outbreak. Vision Nursing Home has now had 29 people test positive, with 15 residents and 14 staff having the virus. The home has been dealing with a staffing shortage, with Bluewater Health providing support. 4 residents of the home have passed away from COVID-19 since the outbreak began on April 23rd. No change in the other 2 outbreaks in Sarnia Lambton, with 2 residents of Village on the St. Clair and 1 at Marshall Gowland Manor testing positive. Overall, Sarnia Lambton had 5 new COVID-19 positive results in the past 24 hours, while 4 more people are considered recovered. This puts the total number of active cases in the region at 44. Well, yesterday the Canadian government announced that the extension to the closure of the border for non-essential trips is going to continue for the next 30 days into June 21st. Todd Kealey handles marketing communications, government relations for the Federal Bridge Commission that owns and operates Bluewater Bridge. He joins me now. And Todd, let's take us through what the last 2 months have been like with the border being just trucks and essential workers. I've got to think operations at Bluewater Bridge have been completely different over this time.
It has been kind of bizarre, surreal at times. Typically, this time of year, we'd be seeing like progressively increasing traffic leading into summertime, and I think we're seeing like 152 cars rather yesterday. Trucks are still doing well, so for that we're grateful. You know, trucking and getting those toilet papers to store shelves is very critical. So that has been, I guess, the one silver lining in that we keep seeing some traffic crossing the bridge.
Is this probably, you know, in your career and everyone you would talk to with your colleagues, is this probably the most unique situation? Like, I would think maybe in a short term, maybe 9/11 would have been the closest, but does this compare to anything?
Yeah, I think 9/11 is the best comparable. The one difference is that I think the span of that was, let's call it a month and a half, maybe, where the effects were felt. And so, in other words, it really turned out to be a bit of a blip. But yeah, it's virtually the same. Well, even 9/11, the truck stopped too, so that was a bit different. But yeah, I guess in a lot of people's lifetimes, this is the most significant event they've seen.
I guess it sort of rolled up a little bit too, from first, I guess, allowing especially the travelers that were coming back from March break and giving them, I would think, information about quarantine, to then basically a complete closure. Was it sort of, from your perspective, a bit of a roll up of measures?
I think it was kind of sudden, actually. I think we were all kind of doing our things, and then for me, the biggest trigger was when Premier Doug Ford announced the school closures, and I think that was on a Thursday afternoon, and things kind of like a switch was flicked, and from the bridge perspective, things were kind of normal for about a day, and then it really tapered off, and then there was a wave of returnees in both directions. And honestly, at Bluewater, it was busy, but Thousand Islands Bridge that we also run, that was like super busy with returnees. And then I think things hit a fairly steady level that wasn't too bad for about 2 weeks, and I think then the next event really was when the automobile manufacturers kind of shut down their production lines. And then, that's when kind of saw a real change, because maybe 20% of the trucks stopped coming. And then, yeah, roughly, and that was maybe about 2 weeks after. So let's call it around April 1st. And then it's been kind of quiet ever since, at least on the car side of things.
So how does it impact things from a staffing perspective? Obviously, things are a lot quieter when it comes to people like you and I, or especially maybe me going across here in Sarnia at times. But obviously, trucks still have to get through, have to be inspected, and those procedures are still in place. So how does that impact things when it comes to staffing?
Well, that's a good question, and I think before I even answer that, I want to acknowledge the fact that celebrate some of our own staff, because people talk about truckers, people talk about medical professionals and the great work they're doing, and people talk about the cashiers and whatnot at stores of frontline operations, but the toll operators are interacting with thousands of people every day, and so far they've done a great job. So I think I'd like to recognize the fact that our own staff have been very diligent and in their commitment to keeping the border open and keeping traffic flowing. So that's number one for us, is really recognizing that dedication. The other stuff, though, we've done some measures to change the way our shifts align so that people can maintain a staff distance while they're working. We've actually recruited and started summer workers, like student workers, on maintenance projects. So, and that was a bit of an education in terms of like a learning process in terms of getting them rolling. But so far so good. Like everything has been working fairly well. Even early on, we made a commitment to ensure that all our staff was well cared for, and that operations would continue as normal as we could keep it for our staff. So things have been going well. Our summer maintenance projects and cleaning projects that are normal for operations are progressing, and even some of our quick little summer projects like repaving projects, we're looking to try and accelerate to take advantage of the fact that there's fewer vehicles that will be affected by it.
And I guess that's where I was going to go next. This is where, in some cases, various companies and organizations are looking for opportunities. And I guess that's the thing. If you can get some projects done when there's not much traffic, talk about limiting the disturbance and the inconvenience to people.
Yeah, right now what our short-term plan include is a bit of a plaza repaving. But for us, the bigger things that were on our horizon are stuff like deck resurfacing and things like that, and those are more like 3-year to 5-year projects. And so we're having to rethink what our schedule is on those. But some of the smaller, quick projects like the plaza repaving, we're looking to see what we can do in the short term.
For tolls, I understand right now sticking to no cash, as a lot of companies are doing. Is that correct?
Yeah, like our operations manager is quite happy to not have to lug around big bags of cash right now, but that we don't see that as a long-term thing. Social trends are reducing the use of cash, so that's good. But right now, we made a decision to go cashless fairly early on in the process, just to minimize the amount of back and forth between the toll operators and the people traveling. And I think that was a very wise decision. It didn't really inconvenience a lot of people, because mostly the traffic right now is commercial, and they're traveling typically with a prepaid account or a corporate credit card, so it's not really affecting their ability to pay. And it is reducing a lot of the risk that our staff have to face.
Got to think the Federal Bridge Commission group, your group, and then the Canadian Border Patrol group must really work hand in hand. And I'm sure even as this has gone on, just looking out for each other's needs right now.
Yeah, we work very closely, especially at a security level and a traffic flow level, with Customs and Border Protection on the U.S. side, and Canadian Border Service Agency on the Canadian side, and Michigan Department of Transportation. Like the four of us are kind of tied at the hip when it comes to managing Bluewater. We want to try and ensure the safety of the crossing, but give everybody the tools they need to be successful in doing what they have to do. Everyone has a necessary job, and we have our operations centers very closely linked together.
Before we let you go, are we now in a case where pretty much the way things are running right now, everyone sort of has their routines and then just waiting to see what happens, whether it's June 21st or some date after that, to open things back up?
Yeah, again, we haven't been idle in what we've done. So I think a lot of the measures that we've done in terms of our springtime operations and maintenance have prepped the crossing to be ready for when traffic does pick up again in a bigger way. And things are moving well. We don't know, we don't know when exactly non-essential traffic will reopen, but we don't really see it as ever having actually been closed because we're still seeing maybe 1,500 to 2,000 trucks a day. So yeah, that's a lot quieter than normal, but it's still a steady flow.
1,500, 2,000. It's obviously interesting numbers because, yeah, that's still a lot of trucks going through. Todd, we appreciate the time. All the best. And as you said, certainly there's some frontline workers that maybe don't often get recognized, but they're dealing with people every day. So pass along our best wishes to them as well. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Anytime.
There's Todd Kealey joining us. The company operates, of course, Bluewater Bridge and other bridges in the area as well. Stay tuned. You're watching Sarnia Lambton Daily on your TV. Welcome back to Sarnia Lambton Daily. Plenty going on when it comes to the United Way of Sarnia Lambton. So let's check in with Executive Director Dave Brown. And Dave, dealing with, there's been various programs with the Compassion Fund. We'll get into that, update on that in a little bit. But the federal government, United Way of Canada, rolling out some pretty big ticket programs. I know we've touched on it a little bit in our previous updates, but what is the latest with that?
Good evening, Terry. It's great to be here on your TV in Sarnia. Yes, the federal government recently announced $350 million that will be shared amongst the United Way of Canada to be filtered down into all local United Ways. The Community Foundations of Canada, which portion will see its way down to the Grand Bend Community Foundation, as well as, of course, the Sarnia Community Foundation and the Canadian Red Cross of Canada. So we're excited to partner with those groups locally. We've always had a great relationship with the Sarnia Community Foundation and, of course, the Red Cross, which is a funded agency of United Way. We fund 3 programs with the Red Cross. So that works out to our United Way will have about $334,000 from that amount that we'll be looking at a number of grants between now. In fact, our online RFP went live this morning. So the timing is perfect, and we've already had interest from 2 or 3 groups. And the money has to be committed by July 31st. So there's no immediate rush for any organizations that are thinking of applying, and I can go through some of the eligibility requirements. But certainly we have to make the commitments by the end of July, and then the money has to be spent and into the agency's hands at the very latest by March 31st, 2021.
Tell us about the eligibility requirements. You tipped us off on it, so let's go.
Well, the United Way of Sarnia Lambton is incorporated as a public foundation, which means we can only fund agencies that are what we call qualified donees. In other words, they are a registered charity in good standing with CRA. They have a local board of directors. They have an annual general meeting. And of course, they service the local community. So that's the biggest thing. The program specifically that the federal government, through their Emergency Community Support Fund process and United Way, is primarily geared towards specific targets, target markets. For example, we're looking at assisting people who, agencies that are trying to address a pressing social inclusion or well-being need that's caused or worsened by COVID-19. We're looking at servicing 1 or 2 vulnerable groups, and that could be veterans, that could be seniors in need, it could be single moms. There's quite a list, and that list is available on the front page of our website. And of course, the program has to be carried out and completed by March 31st, 2021.
So I guess at the end of the day, it does tie into this is something specific really related or challenges related to the pandemic versus an organization who's just saying, hey, could use some extra funds. This sounds like a program either ongoing or new directly related to this. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct. It could be an ongoing program that's seeing an increased need, or perhaps a program that has to adjust how they provide their programs and services locally, or a brand new need. We cannot fund existing programs that we've already decided upon. We can't backdate some of the COVID-19 compassion funding that we've done locally. It has to be for new decisions. And an agency cannot be duplicated in terms of funding with ourselves or the Red Cross or the Sarnia Community Foundation. For example, we can co-fund with any of those partners at a local program, but we can't duplicate the funding. So we really want to make sure that that funding is as transparent an application process as possible and as wide scope as we possibly can.
Is this a little different from the compassion funding as well, where I know for that it was almost close to being emergency funding in some cases, and the applications came in and the money went out very quickly, while this little bigger pot of money, bit wider scope, so therefore sort of a little more time to go through the RFPs and see which is the most worthy or which ones are certainly the most worthy and everything like that?
It certainly is a bigger pot, and it can be for emergency type programming. What's different about that in the Compassion Fund is the Compassion Fund had a limit, a maximum of $5,000 per grant, and we didn't specifically market any vulnerable populations. It was any qualified donee or agency in the community that found themselves in increased need, either a new program or greater need for an existing program. This funding is more specifically targeted to those vulnerable populations, and there's no limit on the maximum or minimum size of the grant. We're pleased you mentioned the Compassion Fund. We're still accepting applications for it. So if you have a particular program that may not meet one of the vulnerable communities, you can still apply. There's still a little bit of funding left in the Compassion Fund. Already, Terry, your viewers would be interested to know, through the Compassion Fund, we've funded 20 different local programs and services for a total of $99,000. So we're grateful for the nearly 100 donors that supported the Compassion Fund locally that way. The many corporate donations, including Libro. I know Cogeco has contributed some funding for that, Scotiabank, Tricar, and a number of others, which put us in that position to be able to meet those emerging needs. Like the Compassion Fund, the Emergency Community Support Fund, or the ECSF, as we call it, that money can be turned around pretty quickly as well. So if there's an agency that has an immediate need, as long as our board approves the funding and the board has a 1-week approval process, we could turn that money around pretty quickly as well. So we're continuing to be flexible, continuing to be transparent and as wide scope as possible. But I think most important, it's local. It's Sarnia and Lambton Community Agency.
Dave, I know one of the big things has been when you've looked at funding, whether it's ongoing or, of course, through this, is indeed when you talk about the vulnerable population and the need, and I know the term means test gets used as well. And I have to think that's part of this criteria because, of course, looking at the need and the vulnerability goes with that hand in hand.
Absolutely. It's very important to us to do a means test, which is really a fancy way of making sure that people who are most in need get the help, whether it's Meals on Wheels or transportation services or even foot care clinics that we provide. There's a means test to identify those who can't afford the going rate or the actual cost of the program or service. So they get it at a cheaper rate than somebody who can afford the proper rates. And certainly that's a big piece as with the Emergency Community Support Fund, the New Horizon Seniors programming that we had funded earlier, thanks to the federal government's New Horizon program, and the Compassion Fund. Needs testing is a key component to really make sure those that are, as I said, most in need get the help. And frankly, we think that that's a key value that our donors have. That they want to make sure that those most in need are getting the help, and people who don't need the help aren't getting it. And certainly that came loud and clear with some of the criteria eligibility with the federal government's funding through this program.
Dave, I know there are people, especially on social media, question, the money that the federal government is spending here and there, but you're at the local level and you see sort of what's behind the curtain. And I understand with this funding, there is a lot of follow-up criteria, auditing, all those kind of things to make sure this isn't just, $330,000 going to Sarnia United Way, where there's a lot of paperwork that's going to go with it to show and to account for it, I guess.
We're very proud of the stewardship that we do with donors' money, and I know all United Ways across not only Canada but across the world are. And we're very happy, very pleased that the federal government has acknowledged that not only are we transparent and really in touch with the local community and what the specific needs are, but they trust us with that funding, knowing that that money is going to go to where it's most needed. And you're right, there will be follow-up. For all three funds, whether it's the Compassion Fund, the New Horizons Seniors Funding, or the ECSF Fund, there will be follow-up reports for the agencies so they can let us know exactly how many people got helped, who got helped in terms of what population, what happened or what would have happened if the program was not funded, and how's the community overall better because of that. So that will not change. All of our 18 regularly funded agencies and our venture grant agencies all go through the same post-funding process. And that will happen again. And we look forward to informing our donors and United Way Canada and our partners exactly the good that came about as a result of this funding.
Dave, that's what's going on currently. We know, and probably in some ways it feels a long time away, but it really isn't. But of course, the fall campaign, and I know that is already, work is normally going on with that right now. You've got a lot on your plate, but look ahead. What's sort of the status and where are things looking towards when it comes to the fall campaign for funding the regularly funded agencies?
Well, that certainly is my number one concern right now is the fall campaign. And we are starting to turn our attention slightly and more each week towards the campaign. We've just mailed out 700 letters to professionals, large and small industry, real estate agents, and so on, recruiting contributions to this fall's campaign so we can continue to fund the 18 regularly funded agencies, 36 programs and services. We're in communication already with some of our largest corporations, trying to, as best we can, put in place the fall campaign. About 76% of our campaign comes from industry and their employees. Many other companies match dollar for dollar. And about 12 or 13% come from retirees who are largely from industry. So it's a big piece of our campaign. We're still hoping that our Enbridge Car Show will continue. Of course, it really is a growing decision in terms of inputs are changing every day. We will have an announcement by the end of the week about a day of caring. Your viewers will know that the last number of years, for I think over 20 years, our campaign has been kicked off with the annual Day of Caring. But because more than half of the work is done at the homes of seniors throughout Sarnia Lambton County, and a lot of the work done at agencies are done at the residences and places of people who have disabilities. So we're going to decide towards the end of the week if we can continue with our Day of Caring this year. I personally think it's a stretch, just given the demographics that we help out. But we'll be looking at what other things we can do instead. Fortunately, our United Way doesn't have a lot of public events like a lot of other United Ways do. So from that aspect, it's not going to have that much of an impact. But regardless, I mean, the Day of Caring raised a lot of profile for us as well as money. The Enbridge Car Show was over $18,000 last year, so we're grateful to those employees and their families who actually ran the car show, and of course Enbridge for sponsoring it. And no decisions have been made yet about the Luxury Lambton Dinner, which is scheduled for the Saturday following Thanksgiving this coming October. So we're not sure what's going to happen with that. Our stair climb will be put on hold for sure, but we're planning on putting that on hold anyways. So there's a lot of things up in the air right now, and but clearly it's a concern of ours, and we're hoping that everybody who contributed in past years see the value and see the need of our funded agencies, and will continue to do so in 2020.
We'll see. I'm sure we move towards maybe some virtual events as well, as companies may come up with those. Well, Dave, busy times. We appreciate your time, and we'll talk again soon.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Terry.
There's Dave Brown, Executive Director of the United Way of Sarnia Lambton. Back with more in a moment on Sarnia Lambton Daily on your TV. That's going to do it for Sarnia Lambton Daily for this Wednesday, May 20th. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you back here tomorrow.